Hey, good morning. This is our August 20th North Texas ISSA chapter monthly lunch and learn sponsored by Centrify. Today we have a couple of topics, dynamic topics from a guest speaker, Jessica Nemmers, and also from Chris at Centrify. So without further ado, let's get through the announcements. This is our agenda with our guest speaker and our sponsor. As mentioned, we'll also have a participant Q&A section made available at the end and speak about job opportunities and everybody's favorite, the winners and the wrap up. Our 2020 board members comprise of the fine folks that you see here. If you have any questions on any of the topics that they cover, please feel free to reach out to them. They're warm, welcoming, and very knowledgeable. You may have had the chance to speak with them at the last conference or the other lunch and learns that we've had in the past year. Our meeting sponsor, as mentioned, is Centrify. And our guest speaker comes to us from Elevate. And Jessica Nemmers is the CISO there. So we will hear more about Jessica and from Jessica as well as from Chris and Centrify as the meeting goes on. Welcome, new members and guests. If you are a new member, please raise your hand if you'd like to announce yourself or maybe what brings you here. We'll give 1 minute or so to see if we have any hands raised. Sean, would you let me know?
It looks like we have Wesley. I'm going to unmute Wesley.
Hey, can everyone see me and hear me?
We can hear you.
Alrighty. Hey, everyone today. My name is Wes, a new member here. I'm actually a part of the Metro Atlanta chapter, but also conduct operations within the Texas market, specifically for North Texas. Again, my background's in counterintelligence, cyber defense, Marine Corps for about 8 years doing that, and carried that through into my current role as a cybersecurity specialist, as well as a director of information security and compliance for a nonprofit. I'm glad to meet everyone here.
All right, thank you, Wesley. Hoorah, Semper Fi, Marine. A couple of us are Marine veterans ourselves. And I think I saw Talia, Sean?
Yes. Talia, you should be able to speak. You may have to click to accept to unmute your mic, Talia.
Oh. All right. Hi, my name's Tala. Right now I'm a pending member. I submitted my application on Tuesday, so right now I guess I'm technically a guest, but I'm studying at the University of Texas at Dallas as a master's student in cybersecurity technology and policy, and I'm excited to hear what you are going to say today.
Excellent, welcome Tala. We have a strong student subchapter, and it's always great to see other UT alumni and alumni students. I'm sorry, UT students on board, so welcome. Sean, I thought there was one more before we move on. No?
I don't see it.
Okay, all right. So thank you both. It's nice to see the chapter growing. I'm sure there are a number of others out there. And so why join ISSA? Since you've joined, we'd like for you to get the word out. There's a section on referrals that comes up next, but a number of different reasons why you join may be to share your expertise, to get the education to share as an educator, and definitely the networking and the speaking events. And there are a number of those opportunities coming up, even in the last part of this year. We're really excited about. You'll hear a little bit more about that. If you were able to find us, then you did well by generally just going to the issa.org page and finding the North Texas chapter. It's pretty easy to find there. There is a fee for the national chapter and a small nominal fee for the local chapter as well. If you are hiring, please make a note of that, and we would like to open up your microphones at the end of the meeting for those opportunities. So please hold on to those. Definitely share them if you would like to share them so that we can know in advance. And feel free to go to our LinkedIn group and fill in some of those requests job request entries there on LinkedIn. Upcoming events. Sean, I think this is a good time to hand it over to you if you want to cover some of our exciting news for events this year.
Sure. I've got a couple of slides here, but really there's a lot of people behind the scenes setting up what's going to be a great virtual CSC Cybersecurity Conference 8 event this year. The date for that event, typically it's been near the end of October. It's actually going to be November 6th of this year. We just updated the website this last week. So if you haven't checked it recently, mark down November 6th as a date where we're going to have a number of talk tracks, a lot of great content, a lot of great sponsors participating as well. So mark that day down. We do have sponsorships still available. Sean Richards, I don't know if you want to necessarily kind of call anything out there, but we are interested in talking to you. If you know a company that wants to support the good work we're doing to help benefit Collin College, or otherwise gain sponsorship opportunities with CSC8. Sean, do you want to add anything to that?
I think that covers it. So we're going to have 3 or 4 levels of sponsorship this year, and there's going to be some innovative things that we're going to try and do with our speakers and our panelists afterwards. And I think we're going to try and have an executive after party and help some of the sponsors make connections with some of the members of our CISO panel, and then some of the CISOs that are in our audience as a slightly separate function and as a celebration for a successful conference. So trying to come up with some ways that the virtual model is going to be different than what we've done in the past, and help people make some good connections there. So if you haven't already received your sponsorship prospectus, please reach out to marketing@northtexisissa.org, and we'll make sure that you get one. We've already have several sponsors signed up, so we're super excited about the conference this year.
Great. And of course, what makes a really good conference is the content. So we are looking for chapter members and also those who are just domain experts who could contribute to one of these content tracks that we're working on. So it's really a unique opportunity we have this year with a virtual conference setting. If those who are distant, who can't attend and deliver a presentation in person, we now have the options to bring some of the greatest content across ISSA together for CSC8. So feel free to spread this far and wide if you have interest in presenting, or if you know those who are. We're interested in receiving presentation proposals. If you go to the website, it's at the very top right, which is a link that'll take you to what it takes to submit a proposal and the deadlines for that. And then the 5 tracks we have this year, one's pretty broad for cloud application and IoT. We've added one for DFIR, digital forensics and incident response. But we know that our membership tends to be pretty technical, so we've also included red team and blue team tooling. So if there's great tools that you have from a pen test perspective, a defender kind of perspective, and you want to share those, that would be a great track for that. And then 2 really career building tracks. One for how to really grow your career. Maybe you're a student, part of our student subchapters, and looking to get into the industry, or you're kind of early in your career and you're looking to grow, looking for tips and tricks for doing that. Or if you're actually running a program, if you're mid-level manager or you're actually a CISO and you're looking for ways that you can do a better job in being effective in those programs, we're looking for that executive level content in our last track. So lots of opportunities to submit presentations. Feel free to check out the website, and we'd love to work with you. If you haven't actually presented before in a conference setting, a virtual conference setting, it may seem daunting, but we can collaborate with you. So we make that a pretty painless process. And I think it's a really good opportunity for a lot of different experts or hobbyists who just want to share something to participate this year in a virtual format. Thanks, Lonnie.
Hey, Sean, just one thing I wanted to call out. So Tala, I don't know what your timing is, but a lot of master's degree and PhD students in cybersecurity are coming up with some really amazing research, and that would probably be appropriate and welcome for submissions for content as well.
All right, thank you, Sean and Sean. All right, and so another announcement that we have is our outreach. So you've seen this before. We definitely have opportunities for speakers, not only at the conference, which is an awesome thing, but at the college level as well. We're looking to have mentors and speakers reach out to those who are looking to get into the cybersecurity industry. There are a number of different facets there. Not cybersecurity is one word that encompasses many things. It's very complex, as you all know. So we really like to leverage your expertise and your kind giving of your time. All right, and please don't forget the meeting survey. One of the things that we do is take your feedback very seriously. You will see that the feedback that you provide from 1 month hopefully manifests as a lesson learned that we carry forward in the next month. The Lunch and Learn winners from last month are here. So Cyber Reason sponsored the winners, and Bradley, Jane, John, they benefited from that. And we also have 5 winners from North Texas ISSA that are drawn randomly. So as part of this meeting, then you will be a part of that random drawing. And with that, I think that is all that I have. I will hand it over to Steve to introduce the Centrify team.
Great, thank you, Lonnie, appreciate it. Hello, everyone. My name is Steve Malezova. I'm a regional manager at Centrify based here in DFW and a proud fellow member of the North Texas ISSA chapter. Centrify is proud to be a sponsor of our August 2020 chapter meeting, and we're very fortunate to bring Chris Owens to you today to provide insights in a privileged access management area of cybersecurity. So why is this subject so important? Well, for one, Forrester states that 80% of breaches involve the stealing of or some misuse of a credential. So protecting credentials is the mission of PAM. Also, Gartner just released its second ever Magic Quadrant for privileged access management. Once again, Centrify is proud to be chosen a leader in the Magic Quadrant. Now, Chris, he's based in the UK, and he's part of a solutions team that helps us earn these industry accolades. He's got over 15 years in privileged access management, and once upon a time was part of a team that involved the largest PAM deployment in the world. He speaks globally now on various subjects in this market, and today he's going to share with us what PAM is, its history. He's going to share how cloud has changed everything. And at the end, Chris will cover some very practical best practices that you can use. So I'm sure you're going to take away a few things here that are going to help you no matter what your role is. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chris Owen.
Thank you very much, Steve. So let me just see when I can share out my screen. Okay, can you see the presentation? Oh.
Perfect. Yes, yes.
Fantastic. So thank you, first of all, for the introduction there, Steve. You know, as Steve said, my name's Chris Owen. I'm Director of Product Management here at Centrify, so look after product strategy, vision, and work within a team of great PMs that look after the individual products themselves. And the session all today is really about education, education on the world of privilege, how it's changing, how it's evolving, and really the role that cloud is playing on that, and some of the risks that you should look out for. I have done my best to de-vendorize this as best as possible, so hopefully there'll be no mention of Centrify unless something's snuck in there, but I really hope not. So first of all, I guess a recap on, what is privilege management? If you Google the word PAM, you get this really long-winded explanation of what is privilege management that really doesn't actually tell you anything. It just gives you a bit of blurb, a lot of words, but I really like to think of it as a risk reduction exercise. And throughout I've been in the PAM space for 19 years now. Throughout my time, I hear 2 requirements every time I ever speak to somebody about PAM. The first one has always been somebody wants to reduce the number of privileged accounts in their environment. That's always a given. And that's why the world thinks that privilege management is a password vault. The second point, the more salient point here, is really reduce the risk associated with users having privileged access. And this point too is really starting to to evolve in the industry. You know, it's no longer about users. What we're seeing in the cloud world is systems, services, APIs, all having privileged access as well. And there are a lot more security controls that are controlling machine-to-machine authentication and authorization as well. So for a long while, you know, organizations have really focused on the external threat coming into our data center, and we have put in place a series of controls that protects our assets within a data center. And as an industry, you know, we have all done fantastically well at protecting a data center. You know, it's extremely rare that a data center gets hacked into, extremely rare. And that's simply because, well, attackers have other ways. So attackers are far more likely to attack your office. They're far more likely to attack a third party, and each one of these has a trusted pathway. So the end result is somebody still gets access to my critical data, but it's how they got access that really matters. And this is changing, you know, with cloud. We all know that the perimeter is dissolved, and people talk about identity being the new perimeter. But these trusted pathways are far more, I guess, explicit than what we've ever had before. And our traditional response to this, you know, in a privileged world has always been, okay, we're going to put in a password vault. We're going to vault administrator, root, EN, all of these default credentials. And password vaults have been popular for 19 years. So when I started in the industry, 2001 was when the first password vault came out, commercial password vault. And it did a fantastic job at managing these accounts, and it still does a fantastic job at managing these accounts. Password vaults are needed. They are a great thing, but they're not the be all and end all. And there's some challenges in password vaulting that really revolve around this. You know, in every environment that you see, users have a standard user account, and the privileged users will have an administrative account or a -admin. And they don't work in a password vault, is the simple fact. They never have. Password vaults were not designed for user accounts. They were designed for shared accounts and default accounts. So what we're seeing in the market is a lot of people have gone down the route, I guess, of embarking on PAM programs, have made the same mistakes that everybody else makes. They try and do too much with a vault, and then they give up, and the PAM thing is too hard for them to try. But with cloud comes new risk, and the privilege world is changing. And the reason why that's changing is because we can't have the same controls applied to cloud and that we have in our on-prem world. And if we think about how cloud is changing, you know, there's some pretty scary stats. They're both scary and good. You know, we like to embrace new technology, but you know, some clever people that do some clever surveys are kind of saying, you know, cloud is the future. 90% have or will adopt it within the next 12 months. Usually it's driven by speed of service, flexibility, lower TCO in most cases. It's not generally where people start. And 34% of enterprises consider security as a top challenge in their cloud journey. And I think it's a lot more than that. You know, certainly in the customers or prospects that I speak to, there's a lot going to multi-cloud and not just settling on one vendor, going multi, and there's various different challenges in doing that. But the biggest thing for them is getting their head around the responsibility model. You know, it's very easy for us to protect a data center because we know what's ours. It's all of ours. We know that we've got to put various different controls, whether it be physical, whether it be technology in place, or even policy. But that changes in the cloud. We don't own the infrastructure. You know, the days of walking into a data center, having to swipe a card, being escorted to a server, and you know, physically hugging our servers, those days are gone, and they're going to continue to kind of decline. Nowadays, you know, everything above the software stack is our responsibility. And traditionally for us as a vendor, you know, where we sit is the identity and access management or privilege kind of layer. And there's really some key threats. And we'll talk about kind of key threats, how they're used, and then some best practices in cloud privilege management. But really the threat landscape and the biggest three threats that organizations have kind of said they most worry about is really from within, social engineering, and the fact that the biggest threats aren't really found in headlines. So what does this really mean? Well, insider threat we've known for a very long time is as pertinent as external threat, and you could argue that they are the same thing. An external threat actor isn't going to break into your network, move around the network calling himself HackerOne. The first thing he's going to want to do is compromise a user's credentials so that he can traverse the network as a standard user. So I class external, internal as the same thing, from a user point of view. Social engineering, humans are the weakest link in security. We don't like to think we are, but we all know we are. And social engineering is one of the most prevalent things out there, as well as phishing, for gaining people's trust and then access to the data. And the biggest threats aren't found in the headlines. No, they're not. And that's because the average kind of time that an attacker exists on a network is some 240 odd days before they go detected. So it's what we don't know that we need to worry about. And, a good case of this is really OneLogin. They got compromised. An attacker obtained a highly sensitive key for their AWS hosted cloud environment from an intermediate host. And they effectively broke into its service using a front door key. And there are so many examples of this. We always say it takes one compromised privilege credential to impact millions. And that could be millions of users, it could be millions in revenue, it could be millions of anything. So what are some best practices, really? And, what can we do to at least help prevent this? There's no silver bullet here. There's no way that you can say, I will 100% protect you by deploying a bit of technology, for instance. It just doesn't work like that. But there are definitely best practices and things that we should do to protect our cloud environments. So we'll look a little bit at, applying a common security model across the entire infrastructure, consolidating identities, ensuring accountabilities, applying least privilege, auditing everything, and then MFA. So when it comes to cloud adoption, one of the inhibitors for organizations is really the myth that cloud requires a unique security model, as it resides outside of our control, outside of our perimeter. But the reality is we need the same security kind of controls, the same security model applied across on-prem and cloud. And this really gives us the benefit of we're leveraging what we already have, deploying the tools that we already have, the knowledge that we already have, the processes, procedures, etc. When we talk about consolidating identities, when people embrace cloud, there's a whole bunch of new stuff thrown at them. There's a new identity store, there's a new directory type, there's a new secrets management solution, a new privilege management solution. And certainly from our experience, what we've seen is that a lot of organizations have effectively expanded their attack surface because they've got identity silos everywhere now. Third, accountability. Shared privileged accounts, Amazon EC2 user, administrator, etc., are all kind of anonymous, So we need to ensure we've got 100% accountability by having users log in with their account, my identity, CO in whatever it may be, and then elevate that as required. Ideally, you want to manage these entitlements centrally. Most organizations out there have Microsoft Active Directory. Use that as the default store and then map those roles and groups to the cloud provider itself. Least privilege. Really, I guess, granting users just enough privilege to perform their role or complete the task in hand in the cloud provider management console or the services or the instances. It is really what privilege management in terms of risk reduction is all about. And least privilege has long been one of the hardest things to do in PAM because everybody's worried about creating roles, etc. But it is the element of PAM that reduces risk and is something that we should focus on more. When it comes to audit, we need to ensure that we're logging, monitoring everything, both authorized and unauthorized users' sessions, to cloud provider instances. We need to ensure that we can provide full accountability of all sessions and that we are basically, monitoring what everybody does, making sure it's attributed to their single user account, etc. And then 6 on this, MFA Everywhere. I guess MFA is one of those things, that gives us all that bit of validation that, yes, I may know my password, but I've also got to have something as well. So implementing multi-factor authentication isn't just about putting it on the front end of a PAM tool. We need to ensure that we're doing this at a particular elevation, at certain command execution or certain actions within a PAM tool as well. So how do we go about applying these in our day-to-day kind of cloud ops worlds? So there are two cases that really we should be paying attention to when it comes to cloud. The first one is securing access to cloud service management. And what does that mean? Well, if I've got a cloud setup, let's say I'm on AWS, I sign in, the first thing that I get is an AWS root account. If I go by AWS best practices, I'll put MFA on there, etc. So the first thing I want to do is vault that away. I want to ensure that it's protected. I want to ensure nobody can access it. And then I want to implement SAML-based identity federation. So I want to federate from my on-prem directory system to my cloud environment, meaning that I only have one identity everywhere. And then I want to ensure that when I do access my cloud environment, I'm granting just enough privilege and elevating what I need to. The other thing that I need to worry about from a user case point of view is making sure I'm securing access to cloud instances and containers. And again, this all has to do with authentication to cloud resources. If I spin up an EC2 instance for something, I don't want to use EC2 user on there. I want to use my identity, which means any action I take can always come back to me from an audit trail point of view. We need to make sure that when I spin these instances up, we're protecting any shared accounts, we're protecting any privileged remote access to those systems, and that we're enforcing multi-factor authentication on them. Now, these are really the two most common privilege use cases that that we see in the market. Protect my access to the cloud, protect things in the cloud. And organizations have, I guess, three different options when it comes to how they go about doing this. So we'll talk about each one of these three. But really, the homegrown hack, build it yourself. On-prem vault, I guess in some ways this is considered a legacy privilege now in new cloud world. And then we'll talk about an identity-centric approach and really what that means. So the homegrown hack, I guess the homegrown hack really is potentially creating a new identity silo. Organizations, when they do a homegrown hack, they tend to use native capabilities within Azure, AWS, GCP, etc. And what that tends to do is, as well as the identity silo, it could also mean you're duplicating your directory store from your on-prem into these cloud environments. Homegrown hacks typically also involve site-to-site VPNs, which turn out quite expensive in the cloud world. But on the flip side, they're using free technology within AWS, GCP, Google, etc. So the flip side of that, the drawbacks of using a homegrown hack, whilst the tools might be free, any, I guess, headcount cost is traditionally prohibitive of these site-to-site VPNs, are very expensive. And then you've got the maintenance. We all know what it's like to develop in-house custom apps. I think most of us tried to move away from that a couple of years ago. But most people try this as a starting point, and you can't blame them. Free is free, and if something's got a free tool, it may do just a good enough job. But from a security risk point of view, we see a couple. Lack of centralized management often leads to blind spots. Organizations who adopt homegrown hacks typically have one for on-prem and then one in each cloud provider that they use. So they've got disparate, I guess, solutions, security solutions. And the other one is VPNs. Most of us now have moved away from VPNs, especially for privileged access. A lot of our users still use it for data access, corporate app access, but certainly not for privileged access. So homegrown hack, good starting point. If we look at vaulting, leaving homegrown hacks behind, vaults have been in existence for 19 years now. And what we're seeing, and this has been happening over the past kind of year and a half, is this seismic shift away from password vaulting. I think everybody recognizes that password vaults are good and that they are needed, but I think we've probably pushed password vaults a little bit too far, and I think this is an industry problem. It's a vendor problem. We have created a bit of a monster here, and now we're trying to pull away from it because it just doesn't work. So on-prem vaults for local accounts, secrets, etc., it's good, but they are resource hungry. They, in some environments, can take up to 40, 50 servers to have a good password vault implementation, which is just way too much. They do require constant synchronization if you're using them in multi-cloud or hybrid environments. And again, most vault solutions, if you extend them into the cloud, would require that VPN infrastructure under the covers as well, which just isn't very good. So what are we seeing? You know, where is the world going from a privilege point of view? One of the terms that we see in the industry, and there's a lot of vendors, you know, there's a lot of great PAM vendors in our space. You know, we are one of many, I guess. And you'll see most are now adopting identity-centric messaging. And you know, where the world is heading certainly is SaaS privilege management based on zero trust principles and using the foundation of identities to do that. And really, rather than, you know, drawbacks to this, there's a lot of benefits when you look at using cloud. So certainly what we're seeing in the feedback we get is it's the least expensive approach from a resource and headcount perspective. From a maintenance point of view, you know, most PAM SaaS providers now providing multi-tenanted architecture, which has built-in economies of scale. Obviously, you know, I know this from the way in which we've designed ours, but, you know, a lot of other vendors do pretty much exactly the same. So I know they will have done this as well, but it will grow as our customers do. It means that we reap the economies of the scale from an engineering perspective and cost perspective from our own SaaS platform as well. But on top of the multi-tenant architecture, SaaS, etc., one of the things that is interesting about where the PAM world going is the change to on-premise architecture. You know, we're starting to see vendors take their SaaS architecture and then enable their customers to deploy it on-prem. And that's pretty neat. You know, SaaS has always been designed for the least amount of servers, auto scaling, etc. So to enable customers to be able to do that as well is quite exciting. Obviously, SaaS brings global scalability. You know, AWS is a Google. They've got data centers with a lot bigger reach, a lot bigger budgets behind them than any of us ever could. So it gives you that truly global scale out without synchronization, multiple VPCs, etc. And the biggest benefit is really on the security side. A lot of PAM implementations can go very wrong. And we've seen a lot of mistakes over the years where people just don't understand, in some ways, the basics, you know, and again, that's our job to educate people. So really this identity-centric, cloud-centric approach to PAM is where we see the market going. And effectively, you know, from an end result point of view, when you put these together, what you end up with is this view of looking at it from an attacker's eye view. And if you were to have an end-to-end PAM solution, let's say you've got a threat actor that looks at your office environment and thinks he might try and compromise a user. Of course, there are various tools, techniques, procedures, etc., that he could use, whether it be phishing, whether it be social engineering. But the first thing that you want is a control on that endpoint. You know, you want least privilege applied at the workstation, and you want multi-factor authentication. And really, the end result of this is you prevent that attacker's ability to install something and laterally move between machines. You know, there's no ability for them to do that. The next thing you think about is, okay, how do I protect my office workers, my users, getting into my environment, you know, accessing data in the data center, accessing resources in the cloud. So what you really want is, you know, this privileged access service that kind of sits there in the middle. Could be a SaaS service, could be an on-prem service, but what you want this to do is broker your connections for your users into your privileged resources. And when it does that, it should use lightweight technology. You know, you shouldn't have to install things. You shouldn't need dedicated infrastructure and all of that, but you want it really to broker your connection in. Now, that service is again protected by MFA. So if the attacker compromises the workstation, they can't hop into the data center. So at every place, you're putting in place a control that makes it harder. In the data center, in your cloud, you've then got further least privilege, further MFA being applied. So again, another layer of controls at every point in the attacker's kind of path. At that point, you'd think that they'd give up, but let's just say they do compromise a third party. You need to apply exactly the same controls to your third parties. And that doesn't mean you need to go and install things on their workstations or know about their security policies. It means you need them to use the same pathways in that your internal users have, because that way you can control things like MFA for them. Ultimately, the job here and the job of privileged access management is to really make it extremely difficult for an attacker to compromise a machine, laterally move, and exfiltrate data. So that being said, thank you very much for your time. You know, certainly happy to answer any questions that there may be, but I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen to this. And Lonnie, I think I'm handing back over to you.
Hey, Lonnie, I'm looking at the Q&A box. I don't see any member questions yet, but let me give just maybe a couple of minutes for some of those to come in. Chris, that was a fantastic presentation. And I actually had a question as I was just kind of listening to thinking about the visibility that you get about extending a solution like that over on-prem and cloud. And so with that visibility, if you were to supplement the kind of logging you get out of that with, let's say, cyber threat intelligence, what's kind of the opportunities there to try to kind of get a coordinated view across a much wider surface area?
Absolutely. And it's a real bugbear in our industry, right? If you look at PAM vendors, ourselves included, every one of us promotes threat analytics. And threat analytics by a PAM vendor is one of the most crazy things you could buy. It is not context aware. I have to apologize to our sales team that are also on this call, but I am brutally honest. PAM tools are not context aware. So buying a dedicated privileged access management threat analytics system to tell you about risk in privilege is, I'm not going to say something crazy, but it is crazy. But when you branch out into cloud, when you have the ability to supplement threat data with existing data that may exist, you know, in Azure Sentinel, for instance, you get a much broader picture of risk. And it's only at that point that you can start to have context. It's only at that point when you can start to take action. So it's a huge opportunity. We, as the vendor market, need to do a better job of working with third parties, you know, not just sending our data out that way and hoping for the best. We need to do better at providing them with the right signals to look for and the right kind of noise within our log files where they can at least have indicators of risk. But yeah, great opportunity.
Awesome. And I see one question from members. So Paul Robinson asks, what's the easiest way to learn AWS and Azure for security professionals in this context?
So in a privileged world, you know, there's so many great resources out there. There's paid for, there's free, you know, YouTube is great on resources, but we as vendors, you know, we're there to help educate. We're not just about selling software. Our salespeople would love to at some point, but we need to educate people. You know, that's what security is about. It's not about buying solutions. It's about education, understanding risk. Me personally, I love, there's a site called A Cloud Guru that are absolutely fantastic in the education space. They've just teamed up with Linux Academy as well. They've got some great learning, so I'd highly recommend something like that. YouTube's got some great resources. Udemy has some great courses. But reach out across your networks. Lots of people are there to help.
Great. Thanks. I don't see any other questions at this time, so Lonnie?
Thanks a lot, Sean. Thanks so much, Chris and Steve from Centrify. We really appreciate it. Now let's move on to our next section, our guest speaker. So we have a double whammy. We will give you not only our guest speaker, But Andrea, our Women in Security Special Interest Group director, is here as a moderator or co-speaker, if you will, to carry on this dialogue with Jessica. Jessica, thank you. And Andrea, do you want to start off with the intro here?
Oh, Andrea, you're still on mute.
Andrea, yeah.
I'm so sorry. I don't have Jessica's bio.
I can introduce myself.
I apologize, Jessica. I kind of sent Lonnie in chat. Yeah, well, stuff happens. But I thought Lonnie was introducing you. He thought I was introducing you. So if you don't mind introducing yourself, and then for the participants, I'm going to be looking for questions, and throughout the presentation, Jessica is going to pause and we can ask questions throughout her presentation. So I'll be looking at the actually the Q&A or the chat. So feel free while Jessica's speaking to send questions, and I'll make sure that I have a moment to ask her during her presentation. So Jessica, thank you for introducing yourself.
Right. Oh, of course, Andrea, and thank you guys, and thank you, Chris. That was a fantastic presentation, and actually some of the things you talked about is a great segue into my presentation about solutions and tools rationalization. So I'm Jessica Nemmers. I'm the CSO for Elevate Credit. I recently changed jobs during the pandemic. So I am with the company. We have 2 locations in the Dallas area, in Addison and Fort Worth. It's rumored that I have an office in each location, but I've never seen it. And so it's been very interesting onboarding after being at my former company, which was Commercial Metals Company, for about 10.5 years. And before that, I was at Perot Systems for 14 years. So I see a couple of my old friends on there, and not that we're old, but we're old friends. So I've had a really strange career. Most people ask, how on earth did all that happen? It was a very long story. I'll tell you over drinks sometimes. But I'm actually a former professional ballerina. After my career ended, suddenly I moved into IT. Being at Perot Systems, I fell absolutely in love with the data center, and that's where my passion for security came. But they found that I could speak in front of large audiences, so I became a trainer and led a global training organization for many years, which was just fantastic. So I've had a really fun career. Got to pivot full-time back into security about 5 years ago, so love being a CSO and working with so many folks like you. And so let me share my screen here. I'll get started on my presentation.
Jessica, it's really common for ballerinas to go into IT, just saying.
I know, I'm one of many, I know. People are like, oh, really, again? Okay, can y'all see my screen? Oh, let me try it again. There we go. Helps to hit the share button. All right, can you guys see the big screen here?
Yes.
Not my notes. Okay, great. All right, so again, I'm talking about today about tools rationalization, but it's also really solutions and looking at your security stack. So kind of what Chris mentioned, a lot of times we're taking on these solutions, maybe they're not really the right solution, or we have other changes in our environment that cause us to step back and say, is this really the right solution within our security stack? Quick disclaimer, I'm used to having to use this. I'm a little bit more flexible now at Elevate. So the Elevate is really excited for me to be here, and I'm so excited to be representing them. I guess I forgot to say. So Elevate Credit is a financial tech company, again, based out of Fort Worth. We are in business to help the middle class. So our mission is to provide an alternative to payday loans. And so many folks have been hit by hard times, especially right now. And we're just here to help them out. And maybe they don't have great credit, but we have programs that will encourage them to be able to pay down their loans quickly, and, you know, some flexibility so they can keep keep afloat, again, especially during these tough times. So I have a ton of pride in the company, and I'm really excited to be here to represent them. Okay, so I was thinking tools, security tools, rationalization. So back again, when I was falling in love with security, this was the good old days. This was our security solution, and it was so simple back then. But then I was thinking, you know, what does it look like today? This is now what it looks like. And it's just, it can get overwhelming. And we have so many vendors helping us secure so many areas. And it can become, you know, suddenly we've got this huge security stack. And as I've noticed throughout my career, you know, back in the good old days, you have all the shelfware. And when we're not selecting the right solution, or we selected a solution that worked then, but we keep doing it, but things change, like Chris was talking about, that really becomes shelfware. So again, back in the day, everything was on CD. I'm sure there's a part of this population that has no idea what I'm talking about. This was after those things called floppy disks. And, you know, basically they become shelfware and these become good coasters. So when we're really thinking of the right solution for your company, I always ask, okay, so when you're selecting the right solution, what are some of the things that go into being able to select that? Whether it's, a lot of times, again, coming out of a manufacturing company, it was price. So if it's expensive, we probably won't be able to implement it. But it's really the features, maybe it's the reputation, where do they fall in the magic quadrant? You know, integration or automation, those are some of the things that we look at. But with all these software solutions available out there, one thing I've noticed that a lot of people don't take into account, and it's the other stuff. So security solutions can be much like a puppy.
So Jessica, real quick, before you go into that, especially when you're talking about, I think the slide that you had that showed all of the available solutions out there. I know that companies sit here and try to say, what do we need?
Oh, you just hit mute.
No, actually I didn't. Somebody muted me. So the question is, with all of the software and applications that are available, it's kind of hard to choose. Should part of the decision process be, do you pick an MSSP? Do you look for an outside vendor versus building your own? And do you put that into your selection process?
Absolutely, and that's a great point. Yeah, so selecting the right solution doesn't necessarily mean it's in-house. A lot of MSSPs are in business and they're very helpful. So maybe it's a blended solution, but definitely, and one of those could be, could someone do it better than we can? I know we have very small security teams out there. We've got lean IT teams. So an MSSP and looking at having a partner could be a huge advantage for a company. All right, so again, everything with it too, though. Don't think of just the solution when we're selecting it. We have to be mindful of all the other things that come with it. So again, security solutions are a lot like a puppy. They're great to have, but then there's a lot of care and feeding. So especially right now, we're finding ourselves, you know, in the midst of the pandemic, and we're also in a lot of technology changes too. Again, what Chris talked about, going from on-prem to the cloud. So is it really time for rationalization? I think it is. I think it's a great time to look back at your security stack, look at your solutions, again, see, you know, can you combine a couple of them? Can you update a couple of them? Do they align with the changing technology? We can't keep using the same on-prem solutions when we're moving so much to the cloud, AWS, Google, you know, Azure. Strategy in the company or leadership might have changed. Maybe you went through a merge with another company, and those mergers, you have redundant solutions. So maybe it's time to take a look at that too. Really looking at the changing threats to your landscape, and coming from manufacturing into financial, they're different threats you know, they're same hackers, but they're looking at different entry points. So are the solutions that I used, you know, maybe in one industry applicable for another? And then again, at the end of the day, we've got real tight budgets right now, and it's a tight economy.
And so that does, especially with COVID right now, Jessica, and everything else, I know there are a lot of companies that have struggled with cash flow, and the last thing they want is their IT departments coming in and saying, hey, we need to buy more security tools, or we need to lower our risk. How do you prioritize the key drivers when you're limited on time or you're limited on budget? If you cannot look at everything, what are the key things you should look at?
Okay, that's a really good question. I would say focusing on specific requirements. So as we go through the next part of my presentation, keep in mind this isn't looking at to change up your whole stack. So look at the priorities of the company, and really it's asking those stakeholders downstream, and it's also asking your stakeholders up. So through your leadership to find out if we have tight budgets, if we have tight time, small teams, what are the priorities, and maybe a gap that can direct us to choosing the right solutions. So let's talk about our inventory, because that's one of the first things. And being new to a company, which I am, we're looking at a solution right now that could be updated. And I said, you know, what are we using it for? What are the capabilities? And you start diving into these, and sometimes a solution was purchased a long time ago. Maybe it was stuck in an auto renewal. Maybe the person who purchased it left the company, and no one really knows what it does. So an inventory is a really good idea, even if it's just jotting it down in an Excel spreadsheet. So again, what are you using right now, and what is it supposed to be doing? But then looking at it of how are you using it. So maybe when you bought it, it was supposed to be all of these things, and again, buying a PAN solution, and we're going to do everything through the password vault, but are you really using the password vault? Well, we're only using it just a little bit over here, so a lot of the solution is either not used properly, or maybe teams have changed and they're not sure how to use it properly. Again, who owns it? Does security own it? Does IT own it? Does application development own it? So that's a good thing too to understand in the inventory, so you can then make sure you have the right stakeholders and decision makers in play too as you're going through this effort. And what is it talking to? We can't, as security professionals, stand up a security solution in the name of security and not consult with other teams. We can be the biggest pain point for an IT team. So it's really important to understand your integrations, your APIs, you know, what these are talking about. And then how much is your program costing right now? If cost is a factor, then that's where you look at your highest cost and see where maybe that becomes a requirement to reduce your overall cost, and you want to have a less expensive solution there. And biggest thing, when you have a portfolio, you've got to know when it's up for renewal, and make sure it doesn't have an auto renew on it. Those auto renews roll over, and then suddenly you're stuck with this solution again for another year. So that's very important to get with your procurement team, you know, your finance team, and just understand and be sure to map that. Okay, I mentioned requirements, and Chris even mentioned requirements again. And one of the things that you have to keep in mind too, just like this cartoon, when you're focusing on requirements and what goals that you're trying to meet within your security program, be careful that your requirements don't become a wish list. And that's something where, that's where you get the scope creep out, and that's where suddenly you have a lot of solutions in your stack that maybe are overlapping or redundant, or maybe not delivering what you need to meet the specific requirements that you had. So what are some of your requirements? Well, we talked about it. Technology's changing. So maybe a solution that you purchased 3 years ago might not work in your environment today. So being flexible and adapting new solutions into your stack. what problems? Is there a problem you're trying to solve, or again, is it to reduce costs? Maybe, you know, maybe there's a new CEO and the board, they're concerned about one thing. So that's where I would encourage you to work up through your leadership and through your executives to find out that, you know, what's on top of mind. I know for our board, ransomware and data breach are very concerns of theirs. So I'm getting a lot of questions back of, well, what specifically are our defenses for ransomware protection? So if it's top of mind for them, I'm going to be looking at solutions to make sure that we are meeting the needs. And I'm able to go back to them. I'll talk about a gap analysis in just a moment and make sure that we are covering any gaps that we might have in our protection for ransomware. What solutions could create efficiency or automation and then lower security risk? Again, like Chris was talking about. Those last two bullet points, those are a little bit, you know, harder to quantify, but also very important to keep in mind. At the end of the day, our security solutions are in place to reduce risk of brand, you know, damage, cost, business disruption due to a security attack.
Awesome. So a couple of questions and one that's come in. So one of the audience questions, would good priorities for any company be, one, a single pane of glass visibility into an attack surface, two, priority of solutions that protect based on risk and assets, and three, ability to be integrated with threat intelligence that are relevant to your organization and risk? I know that's a lot, sorry.
That is, and I agree on all three, absolutely, absolutely. And I love the idea of the single pane of glass. That's really important, and you know, whether it's a SIM or whatever you're using for that, I think that's another risk again, is a bunch of security solutions where you're looking here and you're looking here and you're looking here, and it's very inefficient. And if you're not integrating those IOCs in with that single pane of glass, you might be missing a very early indicator that could make a big difference. So I think those three priorities are very crucial to be thinking about when you're looking at your security stack, and you are looking at it holistically to support your program and not just solution by solution.
Okay, and then another question. How do you ensure that you've included the correct stakeholders in the requirements gathering?
Yes, that is so, so important. Again, take the solution and think about everyone downstream. Who has to touch it, who has to upgrade it, who has to do maintenance, who has to do the VMs, the network, the connections. So think downstream and make sure those people have been consulted, bring them to the table. Ask them, you know, what they think if you're considering a newer product or a different product or consolidating with another product that you already have. And again, talk to your leadership and have them start socializing out a solution and get some ideas. If leadership doesn't feel comfortable about it, if they don't feel comfortable about outsourcing, they see that as a risk, or they don't feel comfortable about the cost, it's really important to make sure that you have them at the table and they've had a say in it. Ultimately, they're probably going to be the ones paying for it.
Absolutely. Okay, and another question has come in. In consideration of solution factors, how do you approach the contractual requirements for cloud-based services from a large cloud service provider? For example, do you look for contractual requirements specifying the use of a CIRT notification process, the use of application security on their solution, or even the geolocation of data in a cloud solution, being notified of when and where stored?
Absolutely, absolutely. And those are really important when you're closing deals with your vendors. I always make sure that I have legal review on these. We want to keep in mind privacy, compliance, controls requirements, and that should be part of your overall requirements, because if this solution does not meet those needs, and that's not the right solution for you. And we've run into that before. It ticked all the boxes, but we couldn't, GDPR wise, we couldn't keep the data where we needed it within that country. So that was it was a no-go for that vendor, and we had to move on to another vendor with the right solutions. That's a really good point.
It is, and I think a lot of people need to also think, most times contractual requirements have been put together by lawyers and procurement who don't understand security. So based on that last question, it's always good to go back and ask and talk to your vendor or talk to your customer on these requirements, because half the time they're just in there. So
right.
they don't necessarily, they may not necessarily apply.
Yeah, no, I have found that too. Oh, well, we just put it in all of our contracts. And I said, well, does it have to be in this one? Yeah, and they're like, oh no, we can update it. I'm like, great. So yeah, good point. Yes, please ask those questions too, because sometimes they are just templates and they'll just leave them in because the last customer needed that.
Exactly. And then a last statement, and it kind of goes along with the last question. Another one of our participants has said, you know, I know it's kind of trite, but the KISS principle, keep it simple. Sam.
Absolutely.
Keep it simple, because all things, to keep things manageable and effective. That, along with the question of, are there any best practices that you have or that you know of that can help that requirements gathering in that vein of keeping it simple and making sure that you're focused on the right things? Is there anything out there that can help organize that a bit?
I actually am going to cover that in just a couple of slides, because I think that is really important, and it can become overwhelming, especially with, you know, the slide with all the technologies out there. So yeah, let's talk about that. And this is actually, the first one is really looking at your total cost of ownership, and then what would the return be? Again, security solutions are a lot like a puppy. So we're looking at the solution and how much it costs, and that's great, and all the capabilities they have, and that's wonderful. But these are all, and there's probably more. These are just the ones that I thought of to splash up here. There's so many things that go into that solution. You've got to have people. You've got to have infrastructure. You've got to have time, and people's time and money, and the maturity. Is your program where you are mature enough to take on the solution? So that might be one of those to look at too. But taking all of these things into account with a holistic view, and then maybe mapping it. So get a chart, you know, and look at the business value versus the cost, and you'll start seeing things that are really plotting down to the bottom left. Those are probably solutions that we're ready to, you know, replace or consolidate with something else. If they're really high cost, but really high business value, maybe those are the ones that we still keep. Really, the sweet spot is that they're a mid to lower cost with a lot of value. And maybe that's, again, with an MSSP versus a solution that you buy and stand up by yourself. There's always a risk. So I talked about consolidation, and again, Chris talked about this too. You know, don't buy a PAM solution and threat intel with the PAM solution. That might not be your best bet. And I've seen with the single pane of glass and consolidation and cost reduction, I've seen the push to stack, oh, well, we do vulnerability management and PAM solution or whatever it is, all in one vendor. That could be good depending on the vendor, or again, depending on the MSSP that could be watching a good part of your stack. But could that also be a single point of failure? And would you be getting the best tool for your needs to meet your goals? And again, those requirements, not the wish list, but the requirements. Or are you going with some of your market leaders? And that's a good diverse portfolio. Maybe I would always say it's a combo. So maybe you want to do, I don't know, some of the native Microsoft stack, because it's part of what you've just purchased with your licensing, and they've invested millions of dollars into their security. but maybe then taking some of those best of breeds and bringing it over the top. And again, whether that be your PAM solution or email security or other things to look at. So just being aware, it's always a balancing act, but careful with the, we can do everything for you, maybe not MSSP, but a single vendor solution, and let those who do it best do just that, and then see where you can get the most bang for your buck from the other vendors. Okay, so one of the things we were talking about earlier is how do you know that this solution or these decisions are really going to benefit the security program and strengthen the overall security posture at your company. It's really looking at your gaps. So I love the NIST framework. I think it's really good for gap analysis. I think it also helps you really look at each area to see how mature we really are. You know, are we just beginning in this area? Maybe it's, you know, cloud, or maybe it's identity access management. But are we mature in this area, or do we have coverage at all? So, and then you can decide. If we're super heavy on detect, but we have nothing planned for DR, then that's a good idea to say, okay, that's a gap. And then look at our requirements. Is that one of our requirements this year? A lot of people with compliance, you do have requirements. So taking in those two compliance related, that would be great if we went for this solution. And I've seen this before too. The security team says, well, we're gonna go with this solution, and audit or GRC says, wait a minute, you just wiped out 3 controls that we're on the hook for. So, you know, PCI has an IDS, IPS requirement. So if you're gonna move away from that solution, but you can't do an attestation that you have that control in place, that might be a problem. So be very aware of your compliance requirements as well. And again, roadmap it out. Look at, with your inventory, that should really show your current inventory, but look at where it's going. And if your roadmap doesn't align with IT, that might be a problem, because again, a lot of those folks are downstream supporting you guys, and also the business requirements too. If the business is real, you know, cloud first, but your roadmap is still very heavy on-prem, there might be a disconnect with your solution set, and rationalizing to older tools might not be the greatest benefit for you. Remember, we have to have a staff to keep the lights on as you're doing a rip and replace. So sometimes it sounds great to, we need to go with this and to take it out and replace it, but be realistic to how much it costs. Because a rip and replace of one solution might be, you know, upwards of $1 million, but right now leaving the solution in place and paying the maintenance during a tough time, or if you want to put budget towards something else, might only cost $100,000. So be realistic to how much it really does cost, and again, the people, and are you ready for it? There's so many times that, oh, we should do that. I'm like, no, we're not really ready for that yet. So maybe waiting and making sure you can fully use the solution is important.
Awesome. So a couple more questions. Especially with the uptick in privacy requirements, do you consider privacy standards as part of the gaps when you're looking at a security solution?
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, that's kind of along those compliance related. That's where, when you're talking stakeholders too, you want to make sure, depending on what your company is, if you have your DPO, your privacy officer, maybe consulting with them, consulting with audit, legal, GRC, but absolutely privacy laws keep changing. They're different from state to state. So making sure that you don't have a gap in there for compliance would be really important.
Okay, and this can be specific to Elevate or CMM or any of the other places that you have worked. Were you required to complete vendor, supplier, security, and privacy questionnaires, or questionnaires coming from your client and customers? And if so, how do you take the gaps from those questionnaires and ensure they're in your requirements, or that you're looking at them when you're picking a solution?
Absolutely, and that's a really good point. We have, and as things were changing, especially for Department of Defense, when I was with a manufacturing company, we might not have had the solutions in place yet. And one of the questionnaires basically was just asking, do you have it in place, or are you moving there, and you know, is it in the next 6 months? And you could tick the box. Once we saw the regulations changing and we were getting those questionnaires in from our subcontractors, that is where we use that to build on the roadmap. So we don't have it right now. That's got to go on the roadmap. That now is becoming one of our key drivers. So again, budget-wise, some things had to step back, go on the back burner, wait a little bit longer, because now we had this new gap, and that's what we had to focus on for a solution to cover that. All right, so just kind of wrapping up, planning for your success. Again, just know what you have, build that portfolio, be realistic about it, how you're using the tools, what you've left on the table, what's sitting on the shelfware. That's a good time to either consolidate or completely replace that product. How is it going to benefit your business? And again, what Andrea was just talking about, if your business has to meet that certain requirement, that security solution needs to meet that requirement too, so that it's really truly for your business and not just for security. Understanding the whole puppy cost of it and all the things that go into that, looking at your gaps, and getting a full nod with your stakeholders. If you need someone to come in and translate the security speak into business speak, have them do that. Maybe your leader can help with those conversations, but make sure that your stakeholders have a full understanding of why you want to go with that solution, why you want to move to an outside provider, and what it will do for the company. And again, just make sure you're not doing anything in a vacuum. Security organizations often become the office of no, and the worst thing we can do is go off and implement something in a vacuum without having our stakeholders as part of it. So be very careful with that one. Okay, and it's lunchtime, so I had to do a food slide. So, you know, when you go to those all-you-can-eat buffets and everything looks really good, and you start piling it up on your plate, a lot of times you're not going to eat all that, and that's kind of what happens a lot of times. So be careful about all the change. Be careful about running 3 POCs at the same time. You still have to have people, you know, running the business while you're off running a POC, and just look at your plate and make sure it's really balanced with your diet and the ability to avoid that shelfware or leaving food behind on your plate.
Awesome. And we have a question from our participants, which is very like the question I was going to ask you anyway. So I'm very happy that they've asked it. What has surprised you the most as you apply these principles in the firms that you've worked with?
It always surprises me when I think, and it surprises me that I completely understand with the rate of change and the rate of staffing, when we actually are paying for a solution and we have no idea what it does or who owns it. That's always surprising, but it's a great opportunity to, come on guys, it makes you look like a hero if you can say, hey, that no longer meets our needs, look at this one. Yeah, so.
Only problem is if you cut it and then the company goes down, oh, maybe we did need that one. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it was the CISO's fault then. So yeah, be careful, because if anything happens, it's our fault too. Yeah.
So true.
Yeah, but that's probably the most surprising, is just not being completely aware. I'm very cost conscious. Again, coming from a manufacturing company, we rub pennies together to make our security budget. So you definitely don't want to be spending anything that doesn't benefit the company or strengthen your security posture.
Okay, awesome. And I think probably just to kind of wrap it up, and we do have another question that came in too, but want to make sure we get this one in as well. Just maybe your top lesson learned from doing this in the past. What you're doing a great job listing out what we should all do, but if you could give maybe an example or a story of something that you didn't do, which is why this list is so comprehensive.
Yeah. Let's see. That means I have to admit to something that went wrong, right? Because everything's always gone so
but
perfectly.
Everybody on this call can feel you. Everybody knows.
Everything's always gone so perfect with me. Yeah, it was really, it was not defining the ownership, because some security products are not managed by the security team. And when you make assumptions of what maybe someone in infrastructure is doing with your security product, and you didn't define it, and you didn't agree to it, and you're not checking on it, it might surprise you when nothing is being done. So like, I'll just use, this didn't happen, but maybe an example, you thought scans were being run, and they said, no one ever told me I had to initiate the scan. You just asked me to set up the VM, you know, or something like that. So I think that was the, no wonder that's not working. It's no one owns it and no one's running it. So I think that would be probably my biggest lesson learned.
Awesome. Okay. And so the another question that was posted from our participants, have you seen any useful implementations of AI or ML that truly improve our ability to protect the environment?
Absolutely. And I always want to say, take it for the grain of salt, right? Because machine learning, and I've always cautioned my leadership on this, machine learning has to learn. So if it says something's wrong and everybody, see, it doesn't work. No, it needs to learn. So you have to tell the machine learning what's right and what's wrong. So it does, AI and ML take a lot of tuning. But once we got it tuned, I think the user behavior, those type of security tools are so important. A lot of security tools still look for things that they've been told to look for, indicators of compromise, signatures, hashes, but it's those little anomalies that are really important. And that's where that machine learning and behavioral just simply says, it might not be bad, but something's a little different this morning. You might want to go check it out. And again, PAM solutions, that's a really important part of that too, is wait a minute, Jessica's account is never logs into that server. You know, let's look at the auditing, let's look at the recording, and especially with all the pass the hash type attacks and the attacks on AD accounts. Yep, I'm a big fan of some of the ML tools out there.
And I think there's a second part of that question that, can you think of a pain point where AI and ML will really help?
Yeah, I would think it would be that. I think it's really around, for us, it's around user accounts. We can get trending, like at the firewall, you can kind of see upticks and you can see a lot of trending. But within users, especially in an environment that's very dynamic, you can't always look at everyone's activity for the day and look at logs. So I think that's where it's been most powerful for me and all of the environments that I've been monitoring over the years.
Perfect, thank you. There are, I'm looking, I don't see any more questions in chat or in Q&A. So thank you, Jessica. Very, very great presentation. I really enjoyed it. Passing it back to Lonnie.
Okay.
There you go, Lonnie.
Yep.
All right. Thanks so much, Jessica. Thank you, Andrea. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for the participation in chat. That's been wonderful as well. We've been looking at ways to engage the audience, and I think that this meeting has shown a little more of that. So thank you. What we're going to do right now is the opportunities. So I think that I saw at least a couple of opportunities. Ed Leonard, if someone could open Ed's mic, if you're prepared to share your opening, we'd be glad to hear it. Sean, do you see Ed there?
I do. I just unmuted Ed. Ed, we can't hear you if you're speaking.
Oh, he put in the chat that he doesn't have a microphone.
Ah, okay. All right. So if you share that in chat, your opportunity, then we'll read that out for you. The other is a job rec from Darren McIntyre, our media director. So, Sean, did we get that one in?
I'll look for that. Actually, Sajeev, I just allowed him to unmute. He raised his hand if you want to go to him first.
All right. Yeah, that sounds great. Sajeev.
Hi, thanks. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Excellent. So we have some opportunity here. I'm one of the partners here at CyberGuard Compliance, and we have a few positions open for what we call the associate role. And it's basically the auditor role. So we do a lot of compliance auditing, SOC 1, SOC 2, PCI, high trust, you name it, we do it. So we have a few openings for the associate role. So 1 to 2 years of experience is what we're looking for. But also if you're looking to change over from a more technical role into an audit role, be glad to talk to you as well. If you can go, if you're interested, if you can go to cgcompliance.com, and there's a careers tab at the very top. Click on that. You can apply through that. Again, that was cgcompliance, all one word, .com. Be glad to meet y'all. Thanks, Lonnie and Sean.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, Sajeev. All right, cgcompliance.com is where you go for that. And Sajeev is actually a board member. So if you have any other questions, then Sajeev, can they just reach you by going to our board site on the NorthTexasISSA.org website?
Absolutely, absolutely. Glad to talk to that, or any other ways, LinkedIn, or absolutely.
All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Do we see any other, does anyone have any other opportunities they'd like to share right now, or? All right. So it looks like Ed Leonard, whose mic is out, he's looking for a network engineer with experience in Palo Alto, Fortinet, etc. You can contact Ed at USA Consulting. His email address is ed.leonard, Leonard, as you were, ed.leonard @usaci.com. Okay. So that's Ed Leonard at USA Consulting, looking for a network engineer. All right. And yes, Jose, that cgcompliance.com is where Sajeev spoke about that opportunity as well. All right, so I've shared here in the chat our survey. Again, you do not need that ticket number in order to submit the survey. Rehashing over July's winners. Again, congratulations to Bradley, Jane, John, Peter, Todd, Joseph, Brad, and Sanjana. Thank you so much. This month we have a random drawing going on as well. You as participants have all been entered into that, and we will be reaching out to the winners directly. So look out for those, and we would love to hear a prompt response to know if you are going to accept those gifts or not. With that, do we have any member announcements that we haven't covered? We'd like to open up the floor once again before we say our goodbyes. If any of our moderators will let me know if we have anything, that would be great.
Hey, Lonnie, it does not look like anyone's raising their hand, and I don't see any other chats.
All right, all right. So with that, we'll give you back 6 minutes, and thank you so much for being with us. And please fill out the survey, let us know how we're doing, how we can do it better, and reach out to us for CSC8. Thanks so much, Jennifer. I'm sorry. Thanks so much, Jessica. I am so sorry.
Thank you, Lonnie. Thanks, guys.
And thank you also to Stephen and Chris from Centrify, our sponsors. Reach out to Centrify for all of the technology that they built and bring. And so we just want to thank everybody once again and have a great week.
Thanks, everyone.